First thought that this was a stack, and I was going to tell Colin if we're fast, we can get through all of these. They brought some more. So what we'll do, we'll try to answer quickly and get to as many questions as we can, but I'm going to look through the cards, and if I get to a question on Social Security, and then the next question is also on Social Security, I may skip that one so we can get to as many issues as possible, okay? And so with that, it may be, given how many questions came in, that we don't get to all your questions. But our first question is this, and by the way, I'm going to give you the card so you've got it too. It's, how will you deal with a tax on earned senior retiree benefits, such as Medicare and Social Security? And that comes from Judy Bryant of Dallas. Here's the card.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that question, Judy. There has been a very clear intention that's been put forward after, I think it was a reckless tax bill in the last Congress, to say that we were going to be able to pay for that by making deep cuts to Social Security and Medicare. And we are going to certainly hold the line on that. That is not going to happen. It's not going to come out of this Congress, and I will certainly be standing up for that. We do have some work to do, of course, in shoring up Social Security and Medicare, and I think that I'm hopeful that we can find some bipartisan solutions around that. But there's no scenario for me in which we're going to be cutting those benefits. There's been some suggestions, for example, around raising the Medicare age. I've seen data that says that if we did that, it would actually be more expensive to would put older folks into the system and take out some younger folks. So we have to be smart about this. We have to figure out a way that is fiscally responsible about approaching this. But we can't, in my opinion, take these earned benefits that people have paid into over the course of their lifetime, these things that people are relying on, take from those funds and say that's how we're going to pay for our tax cuts for the folks who are doing the very best in our economy. I don't think that's who we are, and I think that's bad policy.
All right.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Steve Cotton of Dallas. What specific measures will you support and oppose to secure our borders and reform our system?
This is a very good question. Obviously, it's very topical. We are in the middle of, we just ended the longest government shutdown in history over this, and I think that I've actually had some very productive bipartisan conversations around border security. And I want to separate out border security from this idea, this kind of nebulous idea of a wall from sea to shining sea, because those things are not the same thing. If we actually want to secure our borders, we need to be investing in the technology and in the person power that will allow us to do that. You may not know that, I didn't know this previously, that the Coast Guard is only able to interdict about 25% of the shipments that they know are coming into our country. We need to expand that capacity. 90% of the drugs that come into, 90% of the heroin that comes into our country enters through ports of entry in our airports. The vast majority of our drugs do as well. If we are serious about border security, that also includes beefing up our ports of entry and our airports. Now, let's also be very clear. We have over 600 miles of physical barriers along the southern border that were passed with bipartisan support. And where appropriate, I think that's fine. I'm fine with expanding where we need to, as the experts say we need to, with repairing existing structures where the experts say we need to be doing that. I don't think that it is in the American interest, the people of this district's interest, for us to spend billions and billions of dollars on an ineffective wall that will not do the job that it was intended to do.
All right.
I also don't think that you should, and I don't think that you should, and I appreciate your interest in that. I also don't think that you should shut down the government over a single policy disagreement. And let me mean what I say. There are complex negotiations that go on. There are lots of things that are on the table, that are put on the table, that are moved around. If you don't get your way on one single policy issue, it cannot be the position of the United States government that we're going to shut down and that we will not be doing the work of the people who sent us to those positions over that single issue. We have to be larger than that. We have to be looking forward more than that. And we have to be more willing to compromise than that. And I certainly am willing to compromise. Voted 10 times to reopen the government at funding levels passed by the Republican-led Senate. Those levels included things that I don't necessarily support. But we voted for those because my intention was to open the government as soon as possible and to find a way to negotiate a common sense border security agreement, and hopefully also tackle our broken immigration system. I am still hopeful that's going to happen despite what we are seeing in the news today. I'm still hopeful that this bipartisan commission is going to be able to find to reach an agreement that will get enough support to pass the House and the Senate. We need the president to sign it. We need to get to work on other things. We are a big, enormous country with a lot going on. We need to focus on more than just one issue at a time, and I'm hopeful that we can move on from this.
Our next question comes from, well, it doesn't have a name. Did you feel Beto O'Rourke could have been our Texas senator, and could he still be?
Well, I just want to say I am here in my capacity as your member of Congress. I am not here as a Democrat or as a Republican. I'm not here to talk about politics in any way, shape, or form or fashion. So I will leave that to the political considerations. I'm thankful for Congressman O'Rourke's service when he was in Congress, and hopeful that he will continue.
The next one, and I'm just trying to find ones that we hadn't already kind of touched on. Do you support the new Green Deal?
Right. Well, this is obviously another topical thing that came up this week. I think it was introduced the day that I came back here to make sure that I was present in case anything happened with my wife. I certainly support some of the goals of the Green New Deal, and I think we don't know all the specifics around it, and that's where I think we're going to have to flesh out some of that. But I do believe that in many ways, and this might seem counterintuitive, we are moving ahead here in Texas in a way that I think is one that can be replicated around the country. Wind power is now our second highest source of energy, and we produce the most kilowatt hours of wind power of any state in the country. That's something that we can continue to expand and grow upon, and it's something that the rest of the country is already learning from us and taking some of those cues. And if you know anything about our state, you know that we have unlimited solar capacity. I mean, we get a lot of sun. And so what we have to do is make sure we are investing in the technologies and the R&D that allows us to lower the cost of solar to the point that it is completely competitive and that people want to use it, because for us, that's the way we're going to move into a sustainable green energy power source. And it's going to be one that I think is consistent with our values as an energy state, that doesn't cost us jobs, that is one that translates easily into what we're doing now. I will also say this: I think that we should be not the only country that hasn't signed on to the Paris Climate Accord. And when I say that, I am joined by the largest oil companies here in our country, the Shell and Mobil and others, who sent a letter to the president saying, please don't withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. There's actually broad agreement that we are facing a crisis. There is good business to be made in moving into the green and renewable energy space. We are an energy state, and we should be leading the way in the new era of energy.
Next question: what can Congress do to reduce the national deficit?
Well, this is a critical question, and it kind of goes into some of what we were talking about earlier around Medicare and Social Security. It begins with not making what I think are fiscally irresponsible decisions, and that I would include in the tax bill that passed in the last Congress, that we have seen is going to add $1.9 trillion, and that's not my estimate, that's the estimate of the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan entity that just looks at numbers and says this is what's going to likely happen. It's going to add $1.9 trillion to our deficit. The deficit is ballooning already. You've seen, I think the Dallas Morning News has reported pretty well on this, that deficit is rising in part because we're taking in less revenue. So there are multiple ways we have to go about it. One of them is to increase our growth by investing in things that allow us to grow economically. And that's why I'm so interested in transportation and infrastructure and all that goes into that. Because for us to continue to grow our economy, we're going to have to do it in a way that is sustainable and in a way that allows our businesses to continue to thrive and grow as our population increases. And so we want to grow the economy, we want to make fiscally sound ideas and fiscally sound decisions, and we do need to address some of the largest drivers of our debt. And I think that can be done in a way that is consistent with our values. I hope that we can find some bipartisan agreement around that. But it is an increasing concern for me, especially as we've seen since the tax bill, the estimates have shown that this is not playing out the way that we had been told it would, and that it's going to increase our deficit, and it actively is right now.
All right, let's do a couple of foreign policy. What is your position on U.S. intervention in Venezuela?
Well, this is, it's interesting. I was in a classified briefing on Venezuela a couple weeks ago. And let me first say very clearly that the Maduro regime needs to go. That they have mistreated severely their people. It is, for us, as Americans in the Western Hemisphere, we have a humanitarian crisis going on in Venezuela. There are 3 million people who have already fled that country. They have inflation that is so high that their money means nothing. There are people who are starving, and the aid that we are sending to Venezuela is being blocked by the Maduro regime. You should step down, and we've already recognized, and I agree with the Trump administration's move to recognize the opposition leader, to move on, to try and give Venezuela a fresh start. Let me also be very clear. I do not support a military intervention into Venezuela. In many ways, I think it could be counterproductive for the end goal that we're going for, which is to see the Venezuelan people choose a new direction and to have that be legitimately backed up and done through their processes. And so I am hopeful that that happens. Should something happen with the Maduro regime that forces us to take any kind of action in terms of protecting our embassy personnel or things like that, that's a totally different conversation. But I'm hopeful that the pressure campaign that we're mounting and that all of us need to be keeping an eye on will force out Maduro because he has mistreated his people.
And our companion to that, as far as foreign policy, is will you support HJ Resolution 37 and HR 910, ending U.S. support of the war in Yemen?
Yes, I think, I'm not sure what these exact resolutions are, so I'm going to have to look into the exact language there. What I voted for this week was for us to, under the War Powers Act, make sure that any U.S. aid we're not kinetically involved in the war going on in Yemen. What do I mean by that? I mean that we should not be conducting this war. That the American people we need to have oversight over that and know what's going on there. But that if the American military is involved in the humanitarian crisis that I think is going on there, that needs to end. That's what we voted for this week. Now, we have an ongoing mission in Yemen against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP. And that mission is critical for us. They are one of the most dangerous outfits in the world in terms of their intention to strike our homeland. They've had multiple plots foiled to try and attack airliners of ours, and that is a base of operation for them that we need to continue to keep the pressure on. So I want to be cognizant of that, be cognizant of our ongoing commitment there, but also not a part of and not supporting what I think is a disastrously led war that's going on there right now in Yemen.
And our next question is, what do you see as the next steps for improving healthcare access? Spoiler, I am skeptical of moving some people to Medicare all at once.
Well, thank you. That's it's a big question for us, and I think in the immediate term, the next steps have to be, number one, to stabilize the ACA and to end some of the I think sabotage that's been going on. That as I talked to healthcare executives have told me that they've had to build in large increases in their premiums just to deal with the uncertainty around what's going to happen with the ACA. In that market, certainty is part of the deal, and so we want to make sure that we end that. We have improvements that we need to make, and we do need to improve the ACA, and we have steps we need to take, and so that's the immediate term. The other thing is that we need to address the cost of prescription drugs, and I am very thankful and was glad to hear the President say that he was interested in this the other night. Chuck Grassley in the Senate has also said that he wants to tackle the cost of prescription drugs. There is bipartisan consensus around this, and I think that one of the things that we can really move and get done for the American people in this Congress, despite some of the differences that may exist, is to address the cost of prescription drugs and to address the patent system that has sometimes been abused to try and keep those costs high.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Walt Evans, MD. How do you plan to resolve our immigration crisis? It has been ignored too long, leading to the current crisis.
Yeah, this is the question that has vexed us now for a number of years. I remember when George W. Bush and Ted Kennedy got together and were very close to passing a comprehensive immigration reform. There was another bill later on, a Gang of Eight bill, supported by John McCain and Marco Rubio and others, that almost got through the Senate, and I think, or they got to the Senate and then languished in the House and was never passed and never taken up. We as a country need to take a look at and finally address comprehensively our immigration system. We need to address the folks who are here. We need to address border security. It has to be certainly a component of it. We need to address our dreamers and do the right thing there. We also need to make sure that our immigration system works for our country. And right now, the delays and systems and the way that it's working doesn't. We have a number of foreign-born kids who are going to our schools here in North Texas. I've talked to a lot of them at UTD and other places. When they graduate, I'd like to see a green card stapled to their diploma to make sure they can stay here and keep their talents here. Unfortunately, the way our system is right now, that there's a lot of uncertainty for many of them about whether or not they're going to be able to do that. I'm hopeful that we can at least have an honest conversation about it, and that's where we have to start, from a basis of fact that legal immigration is a boon to our country, that the folks who have come to our country legally have contributed so much to the richness and diversity of our country, and that we want to continue that flow of ideas and that flow of talent into our country. We need to do it in a fairer way, and a way that's more efficient than what we're doing right now.
Well, here's a short one, but one that I think people will want to know about. Do you have an office in Dallas now?
Yeah, so this is a good question. We have an office, and in our office, our folks are working in it. What we are going through right now is a process of making sure that we meet the house's standards for security and secure wiring, which we have not gotten that yet. And so the folks who are setting that up are doing it. I'm hopeful that it will be done very soon. But my district office staff is on the job. If you call our office, you will get answers, and we are already processing and doing casework. We just have not yet been able to open the physical office to the public because there are certain things that the House requires for you to have in terms of the security, in terms of the wiring, that the building that we're in is being updated to get. And so I'm hopeful that'll happen very soon. And I thank you for your patience on that. And we want to be a point of access for you. If you have any issues, and anyone listening online or anyone here, if you have any issues that our office can help you with, please give us a call. You can go to allred.house.gov to get the information to reach us. We will get back to you if we don't immediately, and we will try to address that issue. And we are going to be very cognizant and putting a lot of attention on this, and we'll be having, hopefully, the office open very soon.
Our next question comes from Rabbi Andrew Paley of Temple Shalom. If you're out there, hello, Rabbi. What role can faith communities play in helping support your efforts in strengthening our neighborhoods and parts of the Metroplex you represent?
This is such a great question. Our faith community here has done such incredible work, and they are doing such incredible work, whether it's the Jewish Family Services or the many churches that we have here in the area that are kind of the backbone of our community. And I just want to, first of all, thank you, Rabbi, for the work that you've done, and thank you all who've been involved in that work. I just, one of the things I think people love most about North Texas is how active and charitable our faith communities are. And, the number one thing, when we talk about supporting our efforts and strengthening our neighborhoods, and is that I would like us just to introduce more and to continue to introduce more humanity and empathy for our neighbors. And this is something that across our religious traditions is a common denominator, that we are all in this together, that we should treat others the way we would want to be treated, and that we are made in the image of God, and we should be treated in a way that's respectful. I think that here in North Texas we are in many ways a model on that as well, but our faith communities and our faith leaders on issues, when they step up and use their voice to say this is wrong or this is something that isn't who we are, I think it speaks so much louder than it does just from individuals. So I would encourage our faith communities to continue that work, to continue to help us in the work that you're already doing in terms of community outreach and services, but to continue to encourage people to tamp down some of the tone that we're seeing. We are all Americans. We're all Americans, we're in this together. We may not agree on everything, but especially in a time like this where divisions are being highlighted, I would like that unifying factor to be even louder than it has been.
I'm gonna read the next one, but also preface it, because what I'm doing is looking through them and finding, as we have several of sort of the same thing. So this one says, what is your stand on BDS, boycott, divestiture, and sanction of Israel? We've had others that say, what is your position on the anti-BDS? So basically there's two bills there, one for boycott, divestiture, and sanction, one opposing that. What's your position?
Yeah, well, I am on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and my subcommittee is the Middle East and counterterrorism. And so I'm going to be putting a lot of focus on this region, certainly, and I'm a huge, huge supporter of Israel and believe that we must continue to support our neighbors there in Israel. They are not just our allies. We share so many common values. It's the only functioning democracy in the Middle East. They do live in a rough neighborhood and deserve and need our continued support and making sure that they can defend themselves. And I am personally opposed to any efforts around BDS. And I think that these are things that I certainly do not support personally. What I am looking at right now in terms of the legislation that I've heard about but haven't seen presented in the House is whether or not we can enforce this in a way that's consistent with our constitutional values. Because while I may disagree with what someone does, I want to protect their right at times even to do it, even when I disagree. And so I think that we have to make sure that whatever efforts we take in terms of this particular topic or any others around hot-button issues, that we are not stepping on or stepping over the line in terms of limiting the First Amendment or limiting people's rights to express themselves. I go back to kind of the founding fathers saying, I will disagree with everything you say, but we'll fight to the death for your right to say it. I think that's something we have to keep.
Again, somewhat paraphrasing some of them because we've had several regarding taxes. I'm going to read this one, kind of give you an extra sentence on it. Regarding taxes, as in setting the tax rate or any taxation changes, how do you decide what constitutes fair share for the wealthy, and how does that compare to a middle-class person's fair share? And we've had other questions asking about what changes in taxation you see coming down the pipe. So just your thoughts on our tax system.
Yeah. Well, I do think that we need to have a tax reform. And I think that what I was disappointed in the last Congress was that it didn't start with the middle class and build out from there. At the very least, the middle class tax cut should have been permanent. And I think that I want to make sure that we are not putting the tax burden that I think is currently on our middle class, and that we're doing everything we can to alleviate that. We also have to recognize that we are now more unequal in terms of income inequality than we have been since the roaring 20s. And this is a problem for us that is going to affect every single aspect of our society and that is infecting our democracy. It's one of the reasons why I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of H.R. 1, which is intended to keep money out of politics, to make sure that as much as possible your voices I am a believer in the Warren Buffett rule. Warren Buffett said that he doesn't think that he should pay a lower tax rate than his assistant, and I think that's probably something that should be applied. But I want to do it in a way that is that we are thinking clearly through, in a way that is fully tested and vetted. I don't think we should be throwing around numbers and just saying this is where we're going to get to. I think it has to be something that we look at very conscientiously and say, how can we, in a fair way, produce a tax system that is fair for those folks who have done really well here, who we want to continue to do well here, but who also want to be a part of the society that has helped them do so well. So we have to balance those equities, and that's what I'm going to be looking to try to do.
I'm not on social media. What is the best way for me to follow your legislative activity?
Yeah. Well, we will be doing a newsletter. We'll be sending that out so that people can get that, hopefully, and that will come directly to you. We also, of course, have our website at allred.house.gov that you can go to make sure that you can follow along with what we're doing. And I will be holding periodic town halls. This is not the only town hall we will be having. So local, that we can take our message message to the constituents and let you know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and how I'm doing it. And once we are fully staffed up, we'll also be trying to canvass some neighborhoods and try to talk to folks about what's going on and make sure that we're keeping our ear to the ground. This is something that I'm just really committed to doing, and it's something that I hope that we can be a model in terms of how we do constituent services, how we keep our ear to the ground, how we keep you informed about what we're doing.
Great. Our next question comes from David Galbraith. What can be done to improve the Social Security Administration's ability to solve problems within the system?
Well, that's a good question. I've made a commitment that I will say when I don't know exactly what the question is, and I'm not exactly sure what this question is referring to in terms of Social Security Administration's ability to go about things. What I do know is that we need to give our agencies the flexibility to do what they have to do, but we also have to perform oversight of what they're doing. And that applies to the Social Security Administration, it applies to all of our agencies. This should be a cooperative process, one in which the Congress works with the executive branch to make sure that we're doing the best job for the American people. And I am concerned at times that there have been leaders put in places of authority in many of these agencies who try to undermine the mission of that agency in a way that I don't think is consistent with any goals of the agency, in a way that I think is harmful to the American people. And so that's what I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on.
Our next question, with the 2020 presidential election picking up more coverage, what will you do to protect voting rights and ensure clean and fair elections?
So I want to go talk about a few things here, not about the election and the politics of it, but about what we need to do to expand the right to vote. I mentioned HR 1, which I think you have a sheet there for you that has that I am a co-sponsor on that. HR 1 has broad reforms around voting that I think will help us expand the franchise and get as many people as possible involved in voting, including making Election Day a national holiday. I'm concerned that I've heard from some of my colleagues that they think that would be a power grab. I believe that if more people vote, it'll be better for our democracy. And we don't know who they're going to vote for. That's the whole idea. You should have to make your pitch to as many people as possible. And as a fundamental right, which voting is, we should be defending it, expanding it, and making it easier to do as long as it's consistent and secure. And that is something that I'm committed to doing. In my previous career, I was a voting rights attorney. I've seen some of the very varied methods that states and localities can come up with to try to restrict the right to vote. And part of also HR 1 is restoring the Voting Rights Act, that I think is a real priority. There's one other aspect that I want to talk about though on voting, and that is foreign interference in our elections. Because we can never have happen again what happened in 2016 in terms of a foreign power trying to influence our elections. And this should be a bipartisan issue, and I do think I have some Republican colleagues certainly who agree with this. This should be a bipartisan issue that we want no foreign power to try and meddle in our elections and try to determine who will become our leaders. That is just a common sense thing. We don't know, it might be one party now to be another party later. The whole idea is that we do not want that, and we want to be combating that. And the House has taken some steps in a very bipartisan fashion, I'll say, to try and stand up to some of the bad actors. We put sanctions on Allred and his industries under the